So a lot of you might be actually unaware of this, but there are various organizations online that pretend to fight against anti-Semitism, but they're usually fronts for like a pro-Israel agenda. Now, obviously the Anti-Defamation League has been one of the biggest examples of this recently, where it did have some degree of respectability, where it's pro-Israel biased, although obvious to a lot of people like myself, wasn't as obvious to everyone because, they apologise for a lot of anti-Arab, anti-Islamic sentiment that they pushed in the past. But it's pretty clear, especially with the last year or so, that they are, completely pro-Israel. Even, saying that Twitter has become a cesspool of anti-Semitism, which they were correct about, only to have a meeting with Elon Musk, who then declared more support for Israel, and then they're saying, nah, Twitter is actually pretty alright. Even though anyone who can tell you who has used Twitter, it's literally probably the most anti-Semitic place on the entire internet. But because there's a lot of people on it who are pro-Israel, including the head of Twitter, Elon Musk, apparently the ADL don't have much of a problem with that. Even though he is allowing and he is actually paying people to be incredibly anti-Semitic. A couple of people on this list in front of us. Now, there's an organisation that has been pretty mask off for a while, and that is Stop Anti-Semitism. And you might be more aware of this one because it seems like they don't even really care about talking about mostly right-wing anti-Semitism, which is the real problem. On this, you have Jackson Hinkle, right? Who used to be left-wing, but is now a fascist. These people are not left-wing. So when we talk about left-wing anti-Semitism, who are we really talking about? I can't think of any significant left-wing figure who was actually anti-Semitic. Of course, Stop Anti-Semitism was rabid against Jeremy Corbyn, who, of course, groups like this think is an anti-Semite. And that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about them. But they do something every year called the Anti-Semite of the Year. And surprise, surprise, a lot of people who've won it every year haven't been right-wing fascists. They have been left-wing Congress people. And last year, even more gross than usual, they picked Rashida Tlaib, which we're going to read about in a sec. But this year, they put out a list, one that Ethan Klein would probably like himself, where Hasan Piker is the first pick, Cori Bush, John Cusack, and Greta Thunberg. They're the front four. Four left-wing people. Afterwards, an actual fascist, Jake Shields, I don't know who Jess Natalie is, Jackson Hinkle, another fascist, Candace Owens, another fascist, Dan Bilzerian, another fascist, and Bassem Youssef, an anti-Islamist Egyptian comedian. On that list of the anti-Semites of the year, half of them are not anti-Semitic. They're just left-wing critics of Israel. And this is the dangerous thing groups like this do. They conflate all criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism. And of course, what we're seeing recently, and I think even AOC voted for this bill, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism actually includes comparing Israel to fascist Germany, right? So if you do that, that's actually anti-Semitism. And that's something that colleges have wanted to adopt recently, which is just so insane. So insane to say, comparing the terrible actions of an apartheid state to the actions of this horrible fascist state in the 1930s and 40s, that's actually not allowed. And it would actually be racist against Jewish people to even make that comparison, even when, let's say, the Warsaw Ghetto and Gaza, you can make a very easy comparison between the two of them. So I want to talk about this today because it is absolutely insane. So here's their list, and I'm going to read you some of their justification for putting these people on. Obviously, a lot of them don't need any justification. Jake Shields is just a fascist, right? So is Jackson Hinkle, the other people I said. I can agree that they are anti-Semitic. I cannot agree that, Rashida Tlaib last year swept the vote. This year, 10 new Jew haters are competing for the dishonour. Help us pick the top 3 to be announced on December 15th. So for people like Destiny and pro-Israeli people like Ethan Klein, I'm sure Hasan Piker would top the list for some bizarre reason. But it says here, Hasan Piker, a Turkish-American streamer, uses his Twitch platform to glorify terrorism and spread anti-Semitism. After 10/7, Piker defended Hamas, denying atrocities. Despite violating Twitch's community guidelines, he profits while spreading hateful propaganda. Cori Bush has cemented a reputation as a staunch anti-Semite for a disgraceful voting record. ties to Jew haters like who, and support for pro-terror mobs on campuses, again, framing the pro-Palestinian peaceful protest in universities as a pro-terror mobs. She also blamed Israel's apartheid policies for 10/7. Following her re-election, Bush scapegoated the Jewish community, specifically AIPAC, for her loss. Is AIPAC the Jewish community? Like, how insane is this? A far-right Zionist lobby group, they're saying, is the Jewish community. Do these people honestly think this makes Jewish people safe at all? John Cusack has repeatedly spread anti-Semitic slander. His Twitter feed is rife with blood libel, conspiracy theories, and vile tropes, comparing Jews to white supremacists. Like, what is this bizarro land where you cannot make this comparison? Jewish people can be white. So you can be a white supremacist and be of the Jewish faith or the Jewish ethnicity. Yeah, sure. As an ideology, usually things like white supremacy don't include Jews, but what we're seeing in America right now, that sort of ideology does include them. And they're actually the heads of institutions in the government, especially with Trump, who push this stuff. Like Antony Blinken, are you telling me that guy isn't a white supremacist, right? And how they're justifying everything that's happening to Palestinians. Of course you can make that comparison. It doesn't make you an anti-Semite to make that comparison about people like Netanyahu, Antony Blinken, who do believe in this Western chauvinist supremacist ideology. Falsely claiming Israel created Hamas, well, that's not false. I mean, I'm pretty sure he probably didn't say that, but yeah, everyone knows that Israeli intelligence did help funding the early stages of Hamas to split the Palestinians against each other. Greta Thunberg has turned her climate activism into a platform for Jew hatred. She's joined the keffiyeh-clad protesters, voicing disdain for the Jewish state, from chanting "Crush Zionism" at protests to targeting Israeli Eurovision participants. Her activism now fuels anti-Jewish hostility. So, comparing all of this, comparing these people with the rest of them is so insane. So look, Jake Shields uses his massive social media platform to spread anti-Semitic rhetoric. And the thing is, right, this one is actually more brief and vague, despite the fact this guy is an actual anti-Semitic fascist, where I could tell you off the top of my head so much more stuff he said, but they seem to document the left-wing people the most, because they know the left-wing people have more credibility. The left-wing people are people who everyone listens to, right, about these issues because they make coherent arguments. So they're a bigger target because they threaten the legitimacy of Israel in Western politics more than these fringe figures who everyone can rightly see are pretty much fascists. So that is their, like, you know, insane list. And again, you see how they conflate any criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, which, you know, how does that fight anti-Semitism? You're telling people all the actions of Israel are actually the actions of the entire Jewish faith and various different Jewish ethnicities, right? They all agree with what's going on. They all believe that is the true face of Judaism. And if you say a bad word about, I don't know, destroying Gaza, that means you actually hate Jewish people. So what do you want people to conclude if you put that in their mind? If you're saying that it's actually anti-Jewish people to be against all these atrocities in Gaza, what are you telling people? Are you telling people the real face of Judaism is all these atrocities? And how does that conflation make anyone safer? So if we go on their website, let's look at their past little graphics they made for people who won. So yeah, Rashida Tlaib, I think, is the only Palestinian politician in America. Obviously knows people who've been killed by the Israelis, and this is what they put out about her. She's the anti-Semite of the year. Not any of the other people, not any of the horrible fascists we see in Western politics who are like legit fascists. No, it's the left-wing Palestinian woman. She's the biggest anti-Semite in the world. And again, Kanye West won it the year before. So Kanye West and Rashida Tlaib, they're equally as bad. And of course, you probably have seen a lot of people have actually wrote articles about how they are just as bad. And actually, I saw an article and I read it on, I made a whole video about it. They said Jenna Ortega, for writing something critical of Israel, was actually worse than Kanye West. I'm not even joking. So let's have a look at this quick. I'm not going to play the audio. It's just like some weird song. So here are a few reasons why the Congresswoman is long overdue for the crown. As soon as she took office, she replaced Israel on an office map with Palestine. Is that anti-Semitic? Just saying, you know, this whole territory used to be Palestine before an entire new country was built on top of it. So it keeps on going to say, she was barred from entering Israel due to her support for BDS. Like, supporting boycotts on goods and businesses that do business in Israel, that's anti-Semitic. Again, as a result, she shared an anti-Semitic cartoon that depicts an age-old trope insinuating Jewish control. So Netanyahu and Trump are silencing Ilhan Omar and Tlaib. That cartoon is somehow anti-Semitic. Again, totally not. Tlaib defended the BDS movement and suggested Jews prioritize Israel over the US, invoking the anti-Semitic trope of dual loyalty, which Tlaib didn't do. This organization does it all the time, though. If you're tying being a Jew so much to the state of Israel, what are you saying to people? That all Jews have some sort of interest in the state of Israel, so they're not actually like loyal to whatever country they're in. Apparently, it's also anti-Semitic to vote against Iron Dome funding and also call Israel an apartheid state. She voted against the bill, and the bill asserted that Israel is not racist or an apartheid state. The bill also expressed rejection of all forms of anti-Semitism and xenophobia. So again, they're saying she's an anti-Semite because she thinks Israel is an apartheid state, something that is very well documented. It also says here she's an anti-Semite because she accused Israel of bombing hospitals. This is back in 2023, right? Which we already knew they were doing this. There can be no argument they've done this now. So it's anti-Semitic that she told the truth. And remember, people like David Pakman were also saying this about her. Just absolutely gross shit. And again, she's been vindicated. She refuses to walk back the claim. Yeah, because she was right. She was right. And you're never going to walk back the claim that she's an anti-Semite for saying this, and she was proven right. So basically what you see on these videos is most of the people who win, like Ilhan Omar, mostly they're people who support BDS. Then you have one right-wing person in Kanye West on this list. So obviously, Stop Anti-Semitism is an absolute joke. If you're putting mainly left-wing Muslims or Muslim peoples on your anti-Semite of the year list purely because they oppose Israel, where the only person who's won for actually being an anti-Semite is Kanye West. So what is this doing to people? What is this making people think? The only way you can be anti-Semitic is actually be against Israel. Loads of other stuff, now that's fine. Like, be a Christian Zionist who believes you should support Israel so they can start Armageddon to bring about the end times where Christians will ascend into New Jerusalem and Jews won't be allowed unless they convert to Christianity. That's cool, actually. That's cool. Not anti-Semitic. It's these people who don't like a colonial project like Israel being built on top of their homeland, like Rashida Tlaib, right? So, again, why this is so depressing for like anyone who actually cares about fighting against anti-Semitism is because it feels like we can just never turn back the clock now. It feels like now, because they're conflating all this stuff, like anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, people just don't give a shit, and people are just going to say whatever, and that's what these organizations do. If you convince people that being critical of Israel is actually anti-Semitism, why will people think anti-Semitism is bad then? If you're seeing all the news coming out of Gaza and Lebanon, you're seeing the face of Israel, the true face of Israel, and the whole world is seeing it, and then you're saying to people, if you have a problem with that, you don't like Jewish people, I'm afraid, because this is our real face. Again, do they not see how insane it is? Not to mention, of course, loads of Jews don't actually support the state of Israel. Loads of people are critical of the Israeli state, even if they are Zionists. Like, this is how insane this thing is, right? There are people who support the state of Israel that be critical of everything Israel is doing now. Not loads of people, but if you're conflating everyone together as like pro-Netanyahu fanatics and saying that's the only people who aren't anti-Semites, you're just making it so dangerous for Jews around the world. And of course, this is something that pro-Israel campaign groups or just pro-Israel groups overall like to do. And then muddying the waters actually helps this goal, because an organization like Stop Anti-Semitism, and this might blow people's mind, actually creates more anti-Semitism through this framework. And I just need people to understand these groups don't care about anti-Semitism. They only care about Zionism, and that is actually what a lot of these groups are designed for. Even the ADL, they don't care. They'll partner with Elon Musk, who is insanely anti-Semitic himself, runs the most anti-Semitic social media platform, and pays people to be anti-Semitic. Like these people on the list you saw earlier, lots of them are verified on Twitter, right? So why is Elon Musk not on this list, considering all these people are verified on Twitter and get paid for their tweets? Even the people, obviously, I don't think are anti-Semitic. But he's not on this because he's pro-Israel, right? And if any of these people would turn around and say, I'm actually pro-Israel, they wouldn't call them anti-Semitic anymore. And that's just the gutter that is groups like this. And I actually remember, to end it, when I used to work in journalism, I wrote an article about COVID and how Israel wasn't allowing ventilators into Gaza hospitals, right? There's these groups that like monitor the press, And someone like emails my boss calling me like an anti-Semitic racist for just reporting this thing that was being like well documented around the global press. And it just shows you how they like to scare people. And what they've done now is, people just don't take this stuff seriously. And will they ever take it seriously again? And that's how much damage they're doing to the fight against anti-Semitism by continually conflating it with being against the state of Israel, which isn't actually anti-Semitic, but to groups like this, that is the only thing that makes you anti-Semitic.